Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome to the Pony Bash. Alright, welcome to part 5 of the Pony Bash. This time out we're going to be focused on masking and spraying the markings for the aircraft. Now I've already gone ahead and knocked out what are arguably the hardest markings of the entire thing. The nose script, so Ferocious Frankie, and the tail codes. These are the smallest, most delicate, most complicated mask elements, and it was honestly nice to get them down, even though weeding the script up here took forever. So now it is on to the invasion stripes, the insignias, and the fuselage codes. And each of these has its own challenges, particularly around placement. So making sure that the insignias are in the right place, making sure that the invasion stripes have the proper spacing and the proper location, and making sure, especially on the fuselage, everything kind of goes together is a definitely a logistics challenge compared to most masking jobs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of flip the camera on and off a bit as I place things and walk you through how I am thinking about this and approaching it. And hopefully it'll all make sense and will come out right in the end. Okay, step 1. Place wing insignia blanks on the top and down here on the bottom. And on the sides, place these 9.5mm wide bands, which is 18 inches in 1/48 scale, on the fuselage just forward of the tail, so 18 inches forward from the leading edge. This marks where the invasion stripes start. Now, next up, to make things a bit easier in terms of placement, I have cut these, I believe they are 45 millimeters. I'd have to look at the exact math. Basically 18 millimeters, or 18 inches into 9.5 millimeters times 5 to get the spacing right. Then all these things are for is just literally to help me make sure I put shit in the right place. And that's not how we work. Come on. So they're completely temporary. Aggressively temporary. Because they're literally just exist to help me put some tape down on either side of them. So after a little bit of detacking on my palm, see if I can capture this on camera. I always suck at masking over the bench, but we'll give it a go. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to pull this guy off. Keep it to use later. Other things. And basically I'm going to do the same on the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't get them on here as well, and then we'll pick back up with the insignia placement. Okay, the next step for marking off the wing invasion stripes, I wanted to go ahead and pause kind of midway through to show a bit of my thinking and logic of what's going on here. So, I've got the insignia. Invasion stripes were applied 6 inches in from the insignia on the wings. 6 inches in works out to about 3 millimeters in 1/48 scale. I believe it's like 3.1 something. So I happen to have a roll of 1.5 millimeter Azu tape. This little stuff right here. Just easier to be lazy and just do 2 strips instead of cutting. So lay those right next to the insignia, then lay the spacer in, then put another piece of tape on that end, and that is done. And now that we've got this marked, we can come in here, take this bit off, and that side is pretty good to go for the moment. Now over here, why do I have tape on this wing in this fashion? Well, there's no insignia on this side, obviously, so how do you measure where the spacing is and make sure that it's equal? One really good tip, trick, whatever, to use in these situations is to look for like features and measure the distances. And the distance of the outer gun bay door, so this thing right here, from the inner edge to where the tape starts is 12 millimeters. And so I have 10 millimeter tape, and I hope that's 10 millimeter tape, and I have 2 millimeter tape. Let me double check that real fast, because I think to me it also makes 8 millimeter, and I'd be pissed off if I did 8 millimeter, but I believe it's 10. Yep. Cool. So now that these have sort of marked the position where the stripes start on this side, I can take that piece of tape that I took off from over here, I can place it on this side. And because these are invasion stripes, these don't have to be neat, pretty, perfect lines. Just like that. Okay, so the invasion stripe spacing is pretty much sorted out at this point, so we can go ahead and remove the spacers. There's one. Now it's time to place the other insignias and maybe the fuselage codes, but I think those might have to wait. Okay, all of the insignia mask blanks have been laid down, and now it is time to put the outlines around them, which are on this sheet right here, and use these basically to help locate where the masks need to go on the kit. Okay, so the insignia outlines have all been masked, and I've put some overspray protection around them out of an abundance of caution. I don't think there will be overspray. However, dealing with overspray over a bare metal finish is a huge pain in the ass, so I'm taking a better safe than sorry approach to everything. Now, before I get in and just start throwing around Insignia Blue, which needs more shaking, I can see some red hanging down there in the bottom, I am going to base it in two different colors. First of all, this dark gray, which is a lovely dark gray, not quite black. I believe this is the color that is currently used on that cool Aggressor Hornet that's done up to look like an Su-35. So, nifty color there. And then some neutral gray, because this upper roundel shows a bit of fading and what look like touch-ups. So, we're going to represent that with kind of those two colors. So let's go and do the dark gray first, and I will be back as I get this stuff sprayed, and we can kind of touch base along the way. Alright, the basing layer is down. Now it is time to move on to the Insignia Blue. Okay, the Insignia Blue has been sprayed. Next up is to let this sit for a few minutes and then come back and mask off so that we can spray the white. Okay, so I've masked off the blue portions of the insignias, and now we get to spray these stars and bars. And for this, I'm going to be using MRP's Cleared Up Linen, MRP 256, which is a glorious off-white. And one fun thing, if you look at the photos of Ferocious Frankie, the insignias appear to be a dingier shade of white than the invasion stripes. So I'm going to add in a little tiny drop of beige. And then when I do the invasion stripes, I'll probably go the opposite direction and use Clear Up Linen again, but maybe add in a drop of Insignia White. Okay, so we're back with a bunch of masking taken off and the insignias knocked out. Now, the wing insignias, I went ahead and unmasked them fully because, hey, I can, right? I don't need to put anything else around them anymore. They're good to go. The fuselage insignias, I need to leave masked because we've got invasion stripes, we've got fuselage codes, all kinds of stuff to go on right around them. So currently they'd still have their blue mask on. I'm going to drop the white mask back on and mask around it, make sure that nothing gets through that. Then it's going to be moving on to the fuselage codes and lastly the invasion stripes. Okay, so the fuselage codes have been masked off, and I am now going to spray them with a mix of MRP Super Matte Black and MRP NATO Black. The NATO Black is basically to warm it up and get it a little bit off the scale of just totally black. So that's that. We'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I've gone ahead and sprayed the B7H on both sides of the fuselage, and everything went pretty well, except I experienced a bit of paint lift with the masks, and curiously enough, not on the metallic, on the black itself. So something is weird there, and I am going to kind of give these overnight to do their thing and really settle in. And if I keep experiencing tape lift, that's going to mean some extra masking considerations. So, good times. But so far, so good. The insignias look nice, the fuselage codes look nice, and it's coming right along. Okay, so I've gone ahead and masked off all the areas that need protection from the invasion strips. And now I basically just need to pick a black and start shooting shit. But before I do that, I want to touch base really fast on what's going on here with the insignias, and why there's a little haze of blue around them. Well, basically, I think I fucked up my masking order just a little bit, so this is a great lesson for next time. Because this area is going to be surrounded with invasion stripes, the last thing that I want is basically to go in, put the mask, put the outline down, spray it blue, put the interior mask in, spray it white, mask that off, pull everything off, and then have maybe like a little sliver of the circle up here be still covering bare metal as opposed to blue. So I kind of had to pull everything off, shoot some blue, put everything back on, and call it a day. And that way, when I paint the invasion stripes, there won't be like a little sliver of silver in here or whatnot that I have to fight and correct later on. And then to make sure that I've got good coverage over the stars and bars, I actually took the star and bar masks from the larger wing insignias and overlaid them so that way there won't be any little, color bleeds around the edges or any of that kind of bullshit. And this is just a lot easier to mask, considering I'm masking over it, than using something like liquid frisket or a bunch of tiny little pieces of tape. This is just one quick laydown. So that is that, and let's get spraying. Okay, the black's down, and I ended up using just good old MRP5 for this. Gonna let this sit and come back tomorrow, mask off the invasion stripes, and deal with the white on the undersides and the olive drab on the upper surfaces. And for that olive drab, I've gone ahead and done up the mule in black as well, so I can play around with different combinations. See what I like best for the olive drab on top of the invasion stripes, because I know already that black and white will not work. So we'll pick up in just a minute. Okay, it's just about time to start masking off the invasion stripes, but before I tackle that, I want to touch briefly on the upper surfaces that were overpainted in green. And the going theory is that they were overpainted with RAF paint stocks because that's what they had on hand. And that would pretty much mean RAF dark green, like what's on Spitfires and shit like that. And certainly there were a lot of Mustangs that, for whatever reason, were unhappy with bare metal finishes and were overpainted in RAF dark green. I did the Hun Hunter Texas P51B several years ago, and it was one of those where it came in bare metal and they repainted it in Britain with RAF dark green. Now, the photos of Ferocious Frankie definitely show a dark brownish greenish color covering the invasion stripes. I don't quite buy that it's RAF dark green from those photos, but then again, the colors in those photos are definitely shifted in some direction, and so it makes it tough to really make out. And if you look at certain photos that do show RAF dark green next to olive drab, they tend to be pretty close. So I think it might be more of an issue of this just being further out from ANA 613. Those are similar-ish, but still distant. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take the RAF dark green and tweak it just a bit. I might add in some earlier olive drab, which is much, much darker, or some US Hilo drab or something like that, just to cut down the green levels a tiny little bit. But I also need to figure out what colors to put in here instead of white, because spraying greens and drabs over white is, you need a lot more to get decent coverage and things like that. So I pulled out the Meng Mule, and here we go. So this side is the RAF dark green. This side is ANA 613 olive drab. And going from outside to inside, we have, where'd they go? Dark gunship gray, which is this stripe here and this stripe over here. And I realize it's tough to see where the actual stripes are. And that is a good lesson to me to go a little bit lighter on the coverage. Then we have black and black, and then moving in from that, where did it go? Oh, I put it away. MRP's US equivalent of dark earth, which to me seems kind of light, but it's a good sort of dirty brown color. So that's in the middle here and here, and then just straight up white on the inside. And I'm not happy at all with the white and the olive drab. It turns it kind of like a weird yellowy color. It's not as bad on the dark green, but it needed more coverage to really bury, and that definitely blurred the line between the stripes. So I really think probably the dark gunship gray is the best option. It seems to cover things quite well. And yeah, so now it's a matter of applying these lessons to me knocking paint over to the Edward kit. So to kind of aid me in masking off these stripes, when I cut all the markings on the silhouette, I also cut a bunch of 9.5 millimeter strips. I basically got 2 sets of 5 here, so enough for both wings on the top, etc. Now, I am not going to use these for masking. These are more for spacing and placement. So what the fuck does that mean? I'll show you. So basically, we take this one, just lay it down right there. And so that is now blocking off a section that will be white. Take the next one. The next one will be a black section. Come on. Okay, so that is a black section. And so there we have masked off the black strip. And so there we've basically masked off the white, and we have exposed the black. And now I'm going to come in here and put tape borders on here and all that shit. And then we can pull off these strips and move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it's a really nice, handy way to just space everything out and make sure that we've got the right spacing going on. I'm not actually super interested in having the stripes perfectly straight and aligned, because while these things had various levels of precision, well, you know, there's an infamous photo of the Spitfire being painted really shittily. There are also plenty of examples of P-51s and B-26s and things like that having the stripes relatively nicely applied, but they were still being applied by hand in the field. And even if they were kind of, you know, drawn out with chalk lines or pencil lines or whatnot and then painted very nicely by hand, you're still dealing with, you know, drawing lines on a plane and basically painting inside the line. So over something this big, there are going to be inconsistencies and imperfections. So I'm going to use basically thin Azu tape to get these borders here. And if there's a little bit of, you know, squiggle and whatnot, that's totally fine. So I'm going to go ahead and get this other side done. and we will come back when it's time to start throwing some paint. Okay, everything is all masked up, and it is time to paint. And here are the underside invasion stripes. Overall looking pretty solid. The white is 2/3 MRP 4 basic white and 1/3 MRP 256 clear doped linen, just to warm it up a tiny little bit. I've got a tiny little bit of spray under the masks right here around the gear doors, mainly probably because of that little lip. So I am going to fix that once I take the gear doors off. I think for right now we're fine to just kind of let it hang out. And as you'll notice, I didn't really cover too much of the central exhaust tunneling in here, mainly because a lot of that stuff seems to have cooked off just in operation. So kind of matching that aesthetic. And the main exhaust door, kind of the same thing, where it's got a very patchy coat on it. You can see the flaps down here. So everything's looking solid on the underside. On the upper surfaces, we still have to spray shit. Moving on to the next step, I've gone ahead and sprayed the dark gunship gray over the white areas of the wings and the fuselage. And just a quick note, if you look at reference photos of Ferocious Frankie, this upper fuselage is very weird. The main photos, there's one that kind of shows it from sort of a, like a front 3/4 angle, and there's another shows it from the side. And if you look carefully at the upper run of invasion stripes that have been overpainted, on most aircraft, you see the banding in here kind of the way it looks like it's just been misted over with olive drab. So the white stripes show up a little bit lighter, the dark stripes show up a little bit darker. On Ferocious Frankie, weirdly, the dark stripes show up, or where the dark stripes should be, show up lighter and greener than the stuff around them. And I've been casting about trying to figure out why the fuck this is happening. I know it's been suggested that it's just the different specularity of maybe the sheen of the paint or something like that, but honestly it looks way more pronounced than that to me. And it's almost like they painted it and didn't get coverage of something and painted it again or something like that. But I can't work out a good explanation in my head, and it's definitely something where if I'm having trouble explaining it to myself, then explaining it to others or having others kind of grasp it when they just look at the damn plane is probably asking a little bit too much. So instead of worrying about it, I am just going to go with treating it the way that I'm treating the others. And there's actually another photo, a black and white photo from the starboard side, so looking in from over here, and you see the black darker than the white areas around it. So who the fuck knows? Now, as far as the colors that I'm going to put over this, so we've already done the test with the Mang Mule, and I definitely like the RAF dark green better than the olive drab, but it's a bit green for my taste and compared to the reference photos. And so I wanted to kind of change that up a little bit. And what I did is I took MRP 110, the RAF dark green, and I mixed it 1-to-1 with some RLM 81, which is definitely a browner green. And that got me to this kind of shade, which is still green. You know, there's no mistaking that, but it's not as green. And so I'm going to load that up into the airbrush, and because I ran into super fun issues with maybe covering a bit too much, I'm going to thin it with some Mr. Rapid Thinner. Mr. Rapid Thinner is awesome because you can thin stuff and not suffer too much ghosting or things like that. Plus, I don't want these things to be shiny, and this will probably help a little bit there too. So now I'm going to mix that up, shoot it, and be back in a minute. Okay, everything has been sprayed. It's looking pretty good. Got a nice faint shadow of the invasion stripes in there, exactly what I wanted to hit. It doesn't show up quite as well on the side, mainly because we've got the intense contrast going on with the invasion stripes right there, but it still shows up just enough. So now comes the fun part of unmasking this and seeing what crazy shit in here has decided to lift. Because the fuselage codes proved an issue with that, and I am hoping to God that nothing happens with the Insignia. So let me do that real fast. I'll be right back to wrap this up. Okay, so all the masking has been removed, and for the most part, everything looks really good, except for the fuselage codes, and in particular, the H's at the back. I don't know, man. Whatever I painted this with, I mean, that was MRP, Supermatte Black, and NATO Black. But something about it was just unhappy staying down on the surface. So I'm going to need to cut some new H's, mask and spray that, and that should fix everything up. Other than that, there are a few little tiny, you can see them if I hit the light just right, a few little tiny lifts in the Insignias. I honestly may just keep those. The one over here is maybe a bit more egregious and I think requires some fixing. And then the B up here is all fucked up too. Same problem as the H. Other than that, though, everything is looking pretty solid. My plan to do some subtle chipping on the leading edges actually came through as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this. Again, just some little remasking and touch-ups that need to happen with those fuselage codes. But other than that, considering how complicated this damn masking job was, I think it came through pretty well. So I'm going to call that a wrap to this installment of the Pony Bash, and we'll pick back up in a little bit. Thanks for watching.